Hello, everybody. Welcome to the November webinar presented to you on behalf of Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation. My name is Michael Kramer. I'm the Calibration Program Manager, and glad to see we have so many people registered and logged in with us. As always, this webinar is being recorded. If you had a colleague that may have missed out, or perhaps you want to go back and re-listen to some of it, you can go retrieve this one as well as a wealth of information from past webinars at our website, www.pjlabs.com. We also do provide the individual slides. You'll see a link for that if you just would like to review the slides without the dissertation. During the course of this webinar, as always, you should have a block on your screen for typing in questions. Again, please keep all questions related to today's topic. And at the conclusion of the webinar, we will go and open up my question box and try to answer as many as we can. So again, thank you everybody for attending. As you can see, today's topic is Section 8.8 of the ISO IEC 17025 2017, which is the area of internal audits, internal auditing, and the requirements centered around them. So we're still actually in the transition phase. Hopefully, most everybody has already transitioned to the 2017 standard. That transition date's been extended mainly due to COVID-19 issues until the end of June. Therefore, during the course of this webinar, I do revert back to 2005, just look at some of the key differences still, mostly for the benefits of those that in attendance that are looking to transition, or perhaps looking for a little bit more clarification, or perhaps this is your gearing up for your first initial assessment to the 17025 2017. Basically, the principles behind internal audits remain the same. A couple differences is 2005, it was specified that internal audits was the responsibility of the quality manager. However, the new standard no longer specifies this and simply requires personnel to be authorized for the given task. So we'll resort back to Section 6.2 on personnel here, because when we talk about personnel in the 2017 standard, we're talking about all laboratory personnel, not just the folks that are in there doing the testing, calibration, or sampling within your organization. The internal auditor would also fall into that group. The 2017 standard requires the results of previous audits to be taken into account, and that the criteria and scope of each audit be defined. So the criteria and the scope, basically, what are we doing the audit against, and where is it encompassing us within our organization? So a good example could be our internal audit is conducted against the requirements of 17025 2017, PJLA's policies, and perhaps ABC Company's own quality management system, and incorporates these requirements within laboratory operations at ABC calibration/testing laboratories. So you should have a clear definition of both the criteria and scope of the audit. We'll look at that a little bit more here in a little bit. Now, contrary to belief, there is no requirement as far as a hard line drawn into the sand as to how often you have to do the internal audit. There's no recommendations to conduct internal audits every year, which was a note in the 2005 standard, but it's specific to plan intervals. So there you see the note from the 2015, and that word should in there, that's a recommendation. So now the lab has to establish the plan intervals and needs to comply with it. So that's sort of opens up a little door there. How often do you have to do internal audits? Your internal audit says it plan intervals. Not you could say 10 years. Technically, that is a plan interval. But as per, and I'm going to cite another area of the standard, if I saw that, I would sort of be scratching my head about compliance to clause 8.2.3. Laboratory management shall provide evidence of commitment to the development and implementation of the management system and to continually improve in its effectiveness. So looking at the requirements, 8.8.1, the laboratory shall requirement conduct audits. How often? At planned intervals to provide information on whether the management system A conforms to the laboratory's own requirements for its management system, including the laboratory activities and the requirements of this document. So basically, the main crux of internal auditing, yes, you're required to do them as per 17025. Ideally, it's a vehicle that you will actually utilize to assure compliance to the standard, compliance to your own quality management system. So we're going to dissect this clause a little bit deeper here. So at plan intervals, that's the first thing that comes up into the standard. The laboratory shall conduct internal audits at plan intervals. And I can tell you myself as an assessor, when I start looking at the internal audits, perhaps before going on site, first thing I want to see is what is that plan interval? So that should be documented somewhere within your quality management system. So again, the internal audits need to follow a predetermined schedule established by the laboratory. Your audit will need to cover all activities over a reasonable period of time. It may be inconvenience to audit all activities in a single audit, so it can be spread out over several quarterly or monthly audits. The schedule for such audit can be conveniently drawn up as a matrix covering, for example, a year in which dates are set for each part of the quality system. So again, and I see audits done different ways as far as the plan schedules. Sometimes smaller organizations, it may work better for you just to schedule an internal audit. Predetermined schedule, for example, will be conducted at least annually. In that case, you would do the whole, quality management system audit within the calendar year. Or you could basically say each section will be audited annually, and perhaps might be easier to break it down a little bit, do them per quarter, per month. I've seen them done both ways and all at once. However, the first line of order is you need to establish that predetermined schedule. And I told you, first thing I would look for is a predetermined schedule. And then secondly was your internal audit conducted as per your predetermined schedule. So still looking at 881, the laboratory shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the management system conforms to the laboratory's own requirements for its management system, including the laboratory activities. So what we're trying to convey there, and it's required, yes, you're going to do it to the standard, but you're also going to audit your own quality management system and supporting procedures that perhaps that's you have a top tier document, still utilize a quality manual. Basically, those documents should be the way you are conducting business and the way you are complying to the requirements within the standard. So basically, you're assuring that you are doing complying with the standard. Of course, you're going to write your quality manual, your quality management system to comply with the standards. You want to make sure you're following through and doing exactly what you say you're doing in your quality system in order to maintain in order to maintain compliance. So words are meaningless without intent and follow through. Basically, do as you say as you do. Basically, and if you're not change the way you're doing things, then change the way the quality management system is written. Tell folks quite often, if you have a good quality management system and you have it documented well, somebody should be able to say, pick up your top tier document and be able to drive the ship. Basically, it should specify how you're complying and what you're doing to comply. Conforms to the requirements of this document. This document, of course, is the 17025 document. Going to ensure that, of course, your quality system is intact. You're doing what you say you're doing, and that you are complying with the requirements within the 17025 2017 standard. Also, to provide information on whether the management system B is effectively implemented and maintained. So that should be an objective of the internal audit. And ideally, once you do your internal audit, perhaps ideally you'll have some opportunities for improvement. Like I said, yes, the standard says you have to do internal audits, but hopefully it will be used as a vehicle that will unveil opportunities for improvement for your organization. All right, 8.8.2a, the laboratory shall, as you know, is a requirement. So whenever you see that word shall, that is a requirement. Laboratories shall plan, establish, implement, and maintain an audit program, including the frequency, methods, responsibilities, planning requirements, and reporting, which shall take into considerations the importance of the laboratory activities concerned with changes affecting the laboratory and the results of previous audits. A procedure can be used to meet this requirement. However, it's not required. You have to have an audit program in place. You can still utilize a procedure, have an internal auditing procedure, which can be your audit program, but you're not locked into having a documented type procedure. The laboratory shall define the audit criteria and scope of each audit. So basically, you're going to do an audit. What is the criteria and what is the scope of the audit? Audit criteria is a set of policies, procedures, or requirements. Audit criteria are used as a reference against which audit evidence is compared. So criteria would be, you'll see, such as 17025 compliance, the requirements in there, the requirements in PJLA's policy guides, for example, the requirements that you set upon yourself when you wrote your quality management system. The scope is who, what, where, when, and the criteria is what you are auditing against, whether it's a standard or internal procedures, etc. The laboratory shall ensure that the results of the audit are reported to relevant management. So yes, you do the internal audit. It needs to be conveyed, and it needs to be conveyed by relevant management. So who would that be? I could point to another reference here within the standard. I would say whoever fulfills this role here. As you know, 17025 does not specify quality manager, technical manager. A lot of folks are still using that. However, it does require that the laboratory shall identify management that has overall responsibility for the laboratory. Hence, I would think that that person probably should be conveyed the internal audit results. The laboratory shall implement appropriate correction and corrective action without undue delay. So basically, and I can tell you, when I look at an internal audit, I really do appreciate it when folks actually have some findings on themselves and they run the corrective action procedure. So actually, it makes my job a lot easier if you're doing an effective internal audit. There are findings. And if I, as an assessor, or you as an internal audit, go back to the previous year and you find a finding, then you're looking for the following correction, i.e. containing the issue, and then if needed, the corrective action protocol to be followed. So doing the internal audit, if you have any findings, nonconformances, you want to then crosswalk it over and assure that the corrective action protocol has been followed. The laboratory shall retain records as evidence of the implementation of the audit program and the audit report. So need to see it's being done. Various tools. You could have an internal audit checklist provided by a supporting internal audit report. So yes, you're doing the internal audits, and you need to create and maintain a record that you're doing an effective internal audit, and you are in fact doing it against the requirements of 17025 and your own quality management system. There is a note in the standard that references this ISO document, 19011, and it's basically a guidance document for internal audits. It sets forth guidelines for management system audit, and it is developed by the International Organization for Standardization. So again, that is a note within the standard for your information, and that is what it's referring to there. All right, so a couple things I want to hit on. That's basically it. That's the requirements. We got 8.1, which is A, B, and then we got 8.8.2, and we just went through A through E. But there are some things that if you're looking at this for the first time, if you're versed on 2005, and you may notice that some things are no longer there. So just relaying what I said earlier, we have section 6.2 on personnel. When it says all personnel of the laboratory, either internal or external, that could influence laboratory activities, shall act impartially, be competent, and work in accordance with the laboratory's management systems. Also, looking at personnel, the laboratory shall have procedures and retain records for determining the competence and authorization of personnel. So back in 2005, it was written right in the section of internal auditing that it needed to be done by someone who is trained in wherever possible, independent of the activity being audited. It's not specifically addressed there anymore. However, it is under personnel. Just bear in mind, this is all laboratory personnel. If you're doing your internal audit and you have an individual who is authorized to do the internal audit, you ought to have that authorization recorded in the same manner that you have your technical folks that are authorized to do various tests or calibrations within your internal auditing. You need to determine the competence requirements. So ideally, your internal auditor would have some sort of objective evidence showing that they're competent to perform internal auditing to the 17025 standard. So some other thoughts on internal audit, where an organization is accredited for calibration and or testing and or inspection at the client site or for sampling in the field, these areas should be included in the audit program. So if you're going to the customer site, I know quite a few of the calibration labs that I assess, they do calibrations at their fixed facility, and at the customer site, you want to audit the testing or calibration where they're being undertaken. So if they're being undertaken at the customer site, you want to assure that, i.e., is the equipment being maintained, set up properly? Are the environmental conditions being recorded off-site? And if they are out of tolerance, as stated within the procedure, then are your personnel handling that appropriately? And that's specified in 17025, what to do under those specific circumstances. Just another tidbit, I've heard this before. Audits carried out by other parties, such as customers or accreditation bodies, should not be considered as a substitute for internal audits. You have to do your own internal audit. The key steps of an audit are planning, investigating, analyzing, reporting, follow-up, corrective action, and closeout. Ideally, conduct an opening meeting, and if needed, introduce members of the audit team for some of you larger organizations. Conform the audit criteria, review the audit scope, and clarify any relevant detail in regards to the audit program and timetable. By gathering objective evidence, ask questions, observe activities, examine facilities, and examine records. Auditors should make use of quality management system documents, quality manuals, test methods, work instructions, etc., as reference standards, and verify what the lab is stating as to what is being done is actually the case. So I know that if you've been subjected to an external audit by an accrediting body, these are all things you might notice that we're looking for, we're asking for during the assessment. Wanting to see your procedures, wanting to look at your quality manual and supporting quality procedures. Quite often we assess always what you folks do best, the testing and calibration activities that are being undertaken within your laboratories. Ask questions. Typically, for example, if give you an example, if you have a balance and you're checking that balance for the day, ask the technician, what are you looking for? You're putting that weight on there. What if what if you get this reading or that reading? What if the environmentals were 24 degrees C when you have your environmental criteria set at 20 degrees C plus or minus 2? So also ask questions. Look at the real live documents that the labs are following while you're doing your internal audit, and assure, even within their own quality management system, yes, it's going to be written to comply with the standard. Just assure that the way the quality management system is written is actually being practiced, and you're observing that during your internal audit. You heard me say that word, objective evidence. The auditor should review objective evidence. I refer to them sometimes as real live animals that the management system are being fulfilled. Evidence should be collected as efficiently and effectively as possible. So these real live animals I'm referring to, these are things that you're actually using. You look at a quality manual, for example. Let's look at this first one, master documents list. You have a procedure for document control. It says you're using a master documents list. You're carrying that forward from the 2005 standard. You can still use that to control your internal and external document. You want to actually look at that, sample it, assure that the latest and the greatest are on the master list, and they are also being utilized within the lab. So some other examples of objective evidence would be customers' contracts, customer feedback, purchasing documents, approved vendors list and evaluations, corrective action reports, risk assessment matrix, management review, previous internal audits, personnel training records, customer tester calibration reports, calibration certificates for the standards and equipment, your proficiency testing results, uncertainty budgets, environmental monitoring, etc. Objective evidence can also be considered as anything which is heard, seen, or read, which was evidence in supporting whether or not compliance was met. So basically, when you're doing an internal audit, yes, you need to get up from your desk to do the internal audit. You need to look at the files. You need to watch what your folks are doing. Sure, they're following the protocol that you set forth in your quality management system. Customer feedback. Are you actively seeking feedback? What have you received? Are you getting the responses that you are looking for? Live customer reports. You may notice during an assessment, real live animals. You want to pull up some real live reports that you produce for your customer. You want to review them, make sure that they're clear, accurate, and they're complying with Section 7A of the 17025 standard. Audit findings should be recorded, and any nonconformances should be noted and investigated further by the auditor to identify any underlying problems. So dig a little deeper, get at that root cause. After all audit activities have been completed, the audit team should review and analyze all findings and to determine which are to be reported as nonconformances and which can be included as recommendations for improvement. Audit team should prepare a clear, concise report supported by objective evidence of the nonconformances and recommendations for improvement. So I like to see objective evidence listed. I have seen internal audits with a checklist with nothing but check marks there. You may very well went through the lab and pulled out the objective evidence. Those check marks, though, without listing what was reviewed and stating that your organization complied with that clause, doesn't support it. That audit checklist full of check marks should have been done 15 minutes before your assessment. So document your internal audit, document the objective evidence that you looked at when you were going through the standard and determine whether you did not meet compliance. That objective evidence that sort of conveyed that to yourself, compliance was being met or compliance was not being met. Nonconformance should be in terms of specific requirements of the organization's manual, related documents against which the audit has been conducted, i.e., if there is no requirement, there is no nonconformance. So you're conducting your internal audit against requirements. Those shall words, they are requirements. Your own quality management system, if it says you shall be doing something a certain way, that is the requirements that you're auditing. It's not personal opinions or preferences. It's got to be ideally clear-cut requirements. A closing meeting with senior management of the organizations and those responsible for the functions audited should be held with the main purpose of the meeting as the presentation of the audit finding and to report to the management system in a manner in which they understand the audit results. Hence, you've done the internal audit, you've done a great job. It's not something you put in the file cabinet or store on the server. Convey it to the individuals that would be concerned upper management, the individual who is over laboratory operations. Have that closing meeting include that person within the meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to present audit findings and report to top management in such a manner as to ensure that they clearly understand the results of the audit. All right. Okay, that is the end of today's presentation. Got through it relatively quick. So at this time. I will see what type of questions we have. And like I told y'all, takes me a minute to open up my question tab here. Oh, I got a few here. Have somebody said they couldn't hear my audit. Hopefully that's not the case. If any of you were with me last month, you know I lost conductivity during the audit, during the presentation, and because of a storm that was going through my area, and it popped back on. But my first series of questions had to do with my voice, and that's the first one I got here. But it looks like that was the only one. Hopefully you perhaps just logged in a little bit early there. Well, we received slides after the webinar. Yes, you can receive the slides. You may have missed the first part of the webinar. The recorded version is going to be, oh, my screen keeps jumping on me, for you. And there is a link for just receiving the slides. So go to our website, www.pjlabs.com, and you'll see a webinar tab. And then from there, you see the recorded webinar, and you will see a link for the slides. So you'll fill in some information, and we'll be happy just to send you the slides and use them however you like. Use them for your own training. You put your voice instead of my voice and convey it to your folks. They're a resource for you up there. Thank you for the information. Webinar, I heard you. All right, good. Folks are telling me I came through loud and clear this time. Okay, and I'm reading these as they are typed. I heard you loud and clear. Implement appropriate correction and corrective action without undue delay. Now that's something that's in the presentation. I don't see a question there, but yes, if you have a nonconformance, you want to implement correction, which would mean you contain it. I give the example. If you're sitting there and you're looking at some reports that are being generated, and you're going through section 7.8, and you found an error in that report, correction would be you're going to fix that issue at hand. You're going to correct that report and make sure your customer got the corrected report and not the one with errors on it. If it's a persistent thing and you're seeing several errors, then you've contained it. That one instance, you want to assure it's not going to happen again, i.e. corrective action. Do your root cause, follow your corrective action protocol, implement effective corrective action addressing the root cause, and then going back and assuring that it was effective. I'm sorry, I'm sort of trying to read some of these questions as I'm moving on here. Will the slides be available? Yes, on our website. What have you seen is the most effective way labs use to stick to their internal audit schedule? Any tips? Only thing I can say there is whatever works best for your organization. During the course of this presentation, you may want to do sections of the audit quarterly, or you may want to do it monthly. When I was a quality manager, I used to just like setting a time aside and assuring that the entire audit was done at that period. One thing, your internal audit should be done before your management review. Why? As y'all saw last month, the internal audit is one of the inputs for the management review. I would say, like I said, plan intervals. So that's a requirement. You have to do it at a planned interval. So i.e. if you say you'll do it within a year, you want to assure that you're going to meet that predetermined schedule. So if you think about it, if you did it 13 months later, you can actually write yourself a finding, and assessor could write you a finding for not doing it as per your predetermined schedule. So however you like to do it, I think if you're doing it all at once, that you give yourself a reminder. I find that a lot with the corrective action when folks haven't done their internal audit or even their management review. Yes, you're going to correct it. You're going to go ahead and do it. But mainly we want to assure that the next time around, you're not going to miss doing it again. I see folks utilizing some sort of reminder, perhaps in Microsoft Outlook, to force their hand a little bit. Hey, we need to schedule this to have this internal audit done. We need to complete it by this predetermined schedule. But the best way, I would say, whatever works best for you. You can do it quarterly, do each section, cover the whole standard, cover your whole quality management system that you have in place that states how you're complying with the standard. And for those folks that are accredited with us, recall when we do an assessment as an ILAC signatory, PL1, PL2, 3, 4, you have to comply with those. These aren't extra things that we're putting on you on top of 17025. These are ILAC requirements from P documents. So you want to assure that you are, i.e. PL1, for example, proficiency testing, that you've done your proficiency testing as per your 4-year plan as specified in PL1. For auditing the laboratory, what is the best way? Well, like I said earlier, it's something you're not going to do from your desk. The best way is to get out in the lab, watch the folks do the testing or calibration, ask the questions, and collect objective evidence. For example, when we do assessments, you may notice that with us, we have a form. On that form are the various technical sections, such as personnel, facilities and environmentals, recording the result, uncertainties. So when we're watching someone do a test or calibration, I might get the person's name that actually did it. Then I want to go back and see the objective evidence that that individual was trained and there was a record of authorization that the person was actually authorized as per the standard and to perform that particular test or calibration on behalf of your organization. That's kind of a wide question. What is the best way to audit the laboratory? I say, like with any type of audit, do a gap analysis, i.e. look at the standard, look at the quality management system. So if the lab, let's say, for example, you're looking at document review, and if the lab, you have to control your documents internal and external. And if you're looking at your internal procedure for document control, and it references a master list. So you would fill in the blank, the master list there. This is what our organization is using. Then you want to go out and you want to assure all the gaps are being filled, i.e. you want to look at that master list at your organization. That's just one of many examples, but you want to review clear objective evidence that the quality management system is specifying and how the organization is maintaining compliance. How can you audit without undue delay? This is subjective and should be considered a risk to the lab. It wasn't that you had to audit without undue delay. It was basically if you had any findings that you had to implement your corrective action. That is actually AA2D, implement appropriate action and corrective action without undue delay. Not sure, maybe you misunderstood that particular clause there, but yes, if you have a finding during an internal audit, and if you heard earlier, I love it when labs have findings and they take corrective action on themselves because it makes my job easier. That you want to go ahead and turn the keys and get that corrective action process running and implement it without undue delay. It's actually if you have any findings. All right, a lot of good questions here. Sorry, I might miss other sections of the training. Currently, it is in section 8. Can you inform of the other various topics? Yeah, we're actually internal audit is 8.8. That's what we were going over. But we did look at some things in 6.2. 6.2 is personnel. So if that was sort of confusing, I was sort of trying to convey that section on personnel also includes the internal auditors and those requirements under personnel. So the topic of today was section 8.8, internal auditing, but I did crosswalk up off and over to 6.2 for personnel in regards to internal auditor, particularly requirements concerning impartiality and competence. Is it possible to do the internal audit with a periodically more than once a year? Yes, I mean it's you actually want the internal audit. If you want to do it every 6 months, by all means, you have whatever predetermined schedule you have set down, and you want to. You just have to abide by it. But yes, just 1 year is a recommendation from the 2005 standard that it should be done at least once a year. If you want to do it more frequently, go through the sections more frequently. To me, that was just totally depends on your circumstances, size of your organizations, or things changing a lot within the organization. You have a lot of folks being trained and a lot of activity going within your organization that may warrant you folks auditing more than once a year. But yes, you can do it. You just have to set that predetermined schedule. If you don't have a chance to perform an audit to the customer, is there an alternative to reach the same objective? I guess what you're telling me there, and I apologize if I'm not understanding exactly what the question is. It was sort of talking about when you do work at your customer site that you should audit that. If you can actually go out to the customer site, perhaps some organizations may cover a large area going on site, doing on-site calibration. You want to do at least a verification of that work, i.e., you want to pull up a report that was done on site. From that report, you want to look at the individual that did it. You want to look at their training. You want to look at the standards that were used. You want to look at the traceability. You want to look at any uncertainty and how that was calculated. You want to basically, if you can't be there, if you're actually watching it and doing it, ideally that's the best is witnessing. But you can also do a verification via a paper trail. By that, I'm saying basically you're auditing something that was recently already completed at your customer site. Then look at the supporting documentation that test did comply with the standard, that the person was authorized, trained, that it was reported correctly. Go through that report again, 7-8. And you can always ask questions without being there. If, for example, if you saw the environmental criteria was recorded outside the spec that was specified in the procedure, you may want to call the individual that did the calibration and question that. Hey, did you tell the device operator that it was out of specifications, and did you gain their approval prior to proceeding with the test or calibration? So you can also verify. Okay, scrolling on down here. What is any suggestions or recommendation for a small testing lab, less than 5 people? What is your most common finding when auditing for performance of internal auditing audits? Well, for second part of that question, most common findings, and it's a pet peeve of mine. I find that an audit may not support that the entire standard. You're supposed to audit yourself against the standard. That the audit is not supporting that. By that, you may have heard me earlier talk about check marks. If I just see a bunch of check marks without compliance, excuse me, without the objective evidence listed, it sort of doesn't give a good feeling that the actual standard's been audited. I've seen sometimes just the checklist with references to the sections in the quality system that says they'll do it. That checklist could be used year to year if that has not changed. So I would say just documentation, listing objective evidence that was actually reviewed during the internal audit would be probably, personally myself, just speaking for myself, would be something that I would say I come across as a issue with the internal auditing. For example, if I saw a calibration lab, and I've actually seen this going down the area with sampling, which is an NA for calibration, just a bunch of check marks there. That it was really audited. You don't have a good grasp on what sampling is and why are those check marks there for 5-person organization. One thing with internal auditing is ideally you don't want to audit your own work. So I would recommend perhaps somebody, 2 folks at least, trained in internal auditing for your smaller labs, where you can assure that if the internal auditor is also involved in the testing or calibration activities, that their auditing system may not work, that they shouldn't be auditing their own work. Ideally, you want to have somebody else doing it. Recommendations, I would say, to me, just speaking on behalf of myself, just at least doing it once a year. Predetermined schedule for a small lab like that. I would basically say you want to go through the whole standard at least once a year. Whether you feel it's going to work for you, do it quarterly, monthly. But I would say for smaller organizations, just do a good internal audit, at least, go through the whole standard at least once a year. Let's see. We need to do an audit for each section. Manual, do we need to do an audit for each section? That's what you're referring there. Yes, you have to, for each section in 17025, and that's what you're accredited to. Yes, you need to audit yourself against all, if the manual, if that's what you're referring to as a manual. Yes, you need to audit yourself against all the sections of 17025 that are applicable to your organization. For example, if sampling may not be applicable, reference materials may not be, there may be parts of the standard that's not applicable, but yes, you have to audit yourself against all applicable requirements of the standard. How do you determine if it is a warning or deficiency? I guess you mean a recommendation for improvement or a nonconformance. Well, recommendations for improvement should not be disguised nonconformances. recommendation for improvement, a nonconformance should always be written when a requirement is not being met. So if you can point to a specific requirement that's not being met, then that is a nonconformance and should be written up as such. An opportunity for improvement is it's being done, but it could be done perhaps a little bit better. For example, if you're doing an internal audit once every 2 years, that's a predetermined schedule. And I, as an assessor, I come in there and I'm writing 15 findings. I might write a recommendation for improvement that you start doing more frequent internal audits. Yes, you are complying with the standard you're doing as per a predetermined schedule. But yes, you're just the objective evidence of so many findings, I think, as an opportunity for improvement is perhaps, excuse me, less in that interval. Okay, scrolling right along. This one, that's a good question. If you're a small organization, internal audits are good, but impartial members of the company aren't specifically necessary the right people to check for compliance to obscured method requirements. Have you seen a lab that found a way to supplement internal audits with a more method-specific quality investigation? Ideally, well, for a small person lab, you want to excuse me, you want somebody technically competent to be assessing the lab's technical operations, i.e., even us as assessors during that does your accreditation, we have a background in those areas. They would never, for example, send myself to a testing lab that does cannabis because I don't have that technical expertise, but the assessor they do. So ideally, you want to have excuse me, with the technical portion, someone with the technical expertise to watch somebody do the test and ensure that they're doing it correctly. It can be done by outside sources. I've seen several labs actually. We say internal audit, but you can then hire an outside source to do your internal audits. Again, that's cost money. It may or may not work for you, but it could be an alternative if you fear that impartiality cannot be overcome with your staff, and the folks that could be impartial or not technically competent to do the internal audit of the technical operations of the facility. Cross training, like I said, it's best to have perhaps more than one person involved in the internal audit, because especially if that person is involved in testing or calibration activities, you don't want that person auditing their own work. Yes, there are a few differences between 2005, 2017. We sort of hit on them during the audit. The recommendation for doing it once a year has gone away. You now have to report the internal audit to relevant management. That's new. Excuse me, you have to define the scope and criteria of the audit. That was not specified in 2005. And you also have to take the results of the previous audit into consideration for the current audit that's being undertaken. So there are a few differences there, but the overall objective is compliance. You want to assure within 2005 and 2017 that you're complying with the standard, your own quality management system, and perhaps the requirements of your accrediting body. This next question, and I'm not sure what your circumstances, is there an issue with someone performing an internal audit on the activities and testing that they have performed in the lab? Ideally, you want to try to avoid that. If you can't, though, the only thing you can really do in that case is specify that that individual will do it as impartial as they can. But ideally, you don't want to have the individual auditing their own work. To visit a customer, this is because we perform testing also at customer site. Yes, that's what I was saying. If you if your activities are done at the customer site, that you want to incorporate those activities in your internal auditing. Like I said, with calibration, it's very specific. You know, things are different. You're packing up, things have to equilibrate. You're in a different environment. You're not controlling that environment. There could be some activities that are surrounding you that are actually affecting the calibration that are being undertaken. You want to see those things and witness them. So yes, you want to go out and watch your folks do them on the customer site as well, to ensure that they're meeting the requirements of 17025, and it does address those. Particularly is magnified in 2017 with the environmentals, and if they're out of spec, you know what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah, should recommendations for improvement be provided even if it is not related to a requirement? Maybe an ideal for improvement. Yes, absolutely. If you're doing your internal audit and you come up with you see something that you would consider an opportunity for improvement, yes, I would incorporate that into your internal audit report. Just ideally, yeah, if the internal audit can be a vehicle to uncover opportunities for improvement, and by all means, yes. Can the internal auditor be selected by the other departments? It can. The only thing, though, is like I was specifying, that person, whoever is selected, they need to be authorized to do internal auditing. So if you have people within departments that are versed in the requirement of the standard or versed in the testing and know what they would be looking, then yes. But you should also have a record of authorization and competence that that person is authorized and competent to perform the internal audit. Can members of laboratory do internal audits? Yes. There's nothing in there, just as long as they've been determined competent and authorized to do the internal auditing. Should internal auditor be 17025 certified, or 9001 can also? I think that's the last question. I just got cut off. I guess you were asking me there, if you're trained in 9001, will that suffice for internal auditing? Or excuse me, auditing of 17025? The short answer is no. Yes and no, actually, because 9001, option A and option B, you know, if you're an option B candidate, those sections are incorporated in 9001. So if you're a 9001 individual, and you had training in there, and yes, you're going to ideally learn some other things with your 9001 training, such as objective evidence, interviewing skills, things like that. So there's a lot of things that you may have captured that will benefit you in doing a 17025. And absolutely, it will. A 9001 auditor, you will be able to audit Section 8 of the standard, because they are captured in 9001. But as the prefix in 17025 states, yes, if you comply with 17025, you're going to comply with 9001, but it's not the other way around. So with the technical areas, whoever does the internal auditing should also be versed in the test methods, should be versed calibration wise on or testing, or how you're handling things like uncertainty, traceability, those sorts of things. There's specific technical requirements that your 9001 auditor is not going to touch, but you need to be versed in them, and you need to be technical competent in the areas of testing or calibration in order to do a good internal audit of those areas. All right, very good questions. I'm sorry if I wasn't real clear on some of my answers. Some of the questions are typed in a little vague, and like I say, I'm reading it as I'm getting them. And if you see, if I didn't answer something correctly, and they do find their way back to me, or if I was not hitting the nail on the head, retype it and send it to webinars@pjlabs.com. It'll be sent to me, and I perhaps can sort of digest it a little bit more and give you some more constructive feedback as far as your question. Okay, one more thing before I go is next month. So we are already scheduled. Hard to believe we're in November. Last month of 2020. Hasn't 2020 been a year? And it's going to be scheduled for December 30th. And we're going to look at two sections, 7.6 and 7.7, which incorporates evaluation of measurement uncertainties and validity of results. So get a lot of questions about uncertainties. We're going to hit on some of the highlights as far as the requirements, probably reel in some of PJLA's PL3 requirements with that as far as uncertainty budgets. And then the validity of results, your proficiency testing, other things that needs to be done in order to comply with that standard, that area of the standard. Okay, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope most of y'all have a nice short week this year, this week, and have a good Thanksgiving Day. And we'll see you until after the holidays, or tune in here. So December 30th. Which is a Wednesday. I look forward to coming back and wrapping out 2020 with hopefully our best webinar of the year, section 7.6 and 7.7. Thank you all, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.